Good morning. Good morning. Today is February 26, 2023. I welcome you to New York Buddhist Church's Sunday service, streamed live on YouTube and Facebook. We'll begin with quiet sitting. Please sit up straight, feet flat on the floor, calm your mind, and follow your breath. Today's chant is Junirai on page 59, Tan-Nembutsu and Ekoku transference, followed by Vandana Tina Sarana on page 7, and a reading from the Way of the Bodhisattva. Reverend Cheryl Joko Ikemiya will be sharing today's Dharma message. We will end the service by singing Gathas Onkokusan 2 on page 134 and Nembutsu, page 135. Namu Amida Butsu.
Vandana and Sarana. Please be seated. Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to our Sunday service, regular service in February. And now, if you could please take the handout that was passed out when you came in. And let's read together The Way of the Bodhisattva. All together. May I be a medicine for the sick and weary, nursing them until their afflictions are gone forever. I would be a protector for the helpless, a guide for travelers and their means for crossing a stream, a lamp for those who need a lamp, a bed for those who need a bed, a slave for those who need a slave. May all find happiness through my actions, and let no one suffer because of me. Whether they love me or hate me, may those feelings be the source of their fulfillment. Those who mock, accuse, or wrong me, may they all attain enlightenment. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. And now, please listen to a wonderful Dharma message by Reverend Cheryl Joko Ikemiya. And I'm sure it will be very good, and give it full attention.
Good morning, everyone. So glad that you're here today. Actually, when we just read this, The Way of the Bodhisattva, I'm glad Gary chose this passage because it really relates strongly to my Dharma talk today. I didn't think about it originally, but anyway, today is kind of my own reflection of past experience, so I hope you will indulge with me. So please place your hands together in Gassho. To those who deeply entrust themselves to Amida's vow of great compassion, should all say Namo Amida Butsu constantly, whether they are waking or sleeping. These are the words of Shinran Shonin from the hymns of the Dharma ages. Namo Amida Butsu. These past few weeks, I thought a lot about the Nembutsu and its living history in America. A couple of weeks ago, we heard a talk at the Eastern Buddhist League Conference. It was on February 11th. And Reverend Dr. David Matsumoto talked about living the Nembutsu. He spoke about how Shinran called the Nembutsu the great practice. Shinran said, "To say the name of the Tathagata, of unhindered light, is the great practice. But ultimately, we humans who are full of pride," these are my own words, I'm sorry. Ultimately, we humans who are full of pride and self-centered are hindered when we deem that saying the Nembutsu is our practice, because such a practice may come from self-power or self-direction to achieve enlightenment. Our ego selves can be easily drawn into a self-generating practice of recitation with the goal of nirvana or the Pure Land. True Nembutsu comes from Amida calling to us. And when this occurs, we are unconsciously drawn to and embraced by Amida's call to us. When we say we hear the name calling, what does that mean? As someone who didn't grow up in the Jodo Shinshu tradition, but rather Christian and later Zen Buddhist teachings, my encounter with the Nembutsu was filled with a lot of questions. I heard people reciting the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, but what was its significance? Why would and how could one encounter the Buddha when saying the name? Why is the Nembutsu so essential to Shinran's teaching, and what experience of Shinjin, that is Amida calling to us and embracing us, what is this experience? Embracing us with infinite compassion and wisdom. So I asked Dr. Matsumoto at the lecture, and he responded, we should think about our own Nembutsu history. This is a history of past and current, personal and collective experience, as I have recently discovered myself, looking at the larger history of Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu Buddhism in America. So when we say the Nembutsu, we think of those who have walked the path before us. We follow in their footprints and their experience. They are our teachers, our Nembutsu history. The history is peopled with teachers of all configurations. ministers, elders, persons of faith who have lived the Nembutsu in their daily life, our children, our pets. All of these are ways that we really truly experience the Nembutsu. We see them embodying and bringing to life Amida's boundless wisdom and compassion as they live their lives with humility, kindness, patience, perseverance, generosity, and wisdom. As we say the Nembutsu, the very act of saying and hearing the Nembutsu begins to clearly open our eyes. And with clarity and a place of equanimity, we begin to see our lives, our relationship to our family, friends, and everybody that we encounter. We begin to see clearly how we are bound together as an infinite net of causes and conditions. Here at the New York Buddhist Church, we are entering into our 85th year since its founding. We see a rich history of Nembutsu back to its founder, Reverend Hosen Seki and Mrs. Seki, and the leaders who kept the teaching alive throughout many difficult years. And you might not know it, but there is a history of oppressive struggle, strong belief, and communal strength for Jodo Shinshu in America, which I've recently learned about more in depth. So last week, a group of my maternal relatives went to Los Angeles for the Day of Remembrance at the Japanese American National Museum. The Day of Remembrance is the day that the Executive Order 9066 was signed by President Roosevelt. And this order resulted in incarcerating all the people of Japanese descent on the West Coast. So my family members are third, fourth, and fifth generations of the Morita clan in the U.S. On this occasion, they bore witness to their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, great-aunts, and great-uncles, their incarceration in the American concentration camps during World War II. They did this by placing a stamp by the names of those same relatives in the book called the Idaicho, the National Names Monument of Persons of Japanese Ancestry Incarcerated during World War II. And Reverend Gary spoke about this last September when he returned from participating in the installation of this book, the Idaicho, which is a national monument, remembering all the 120,000 people who were incarcerated in camps. Hoshina Seki also participated in that ceremony. My family members, were in 3 of the 75 sites of wartime incarceration. They were in Tule Lake in California, Minidoka in Idaho, Kennedy Internment Camp in Texas. Originally, they were living in Oregon, and so they had been moved to these different locations to spend the next several or 3 years of their lives. For these, the next generation relatives, my daughter and her cousins and so forth, the reality of what our family had endured during that opened up so many questions for them. It was a living encounter of the past. My daughter talked about this experience and made me think more about the importance of survival of religion in the internment camps. This indeed had an important impact on the Nembutsu history of our Jodo Shinshu tradition in America and on the Nembutsu history of New York Buddhist Church itself. following the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the declaration of war with Japan on February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Executive Order 9066, which gave the military the discretion to secure the safety of the U.S. against the supposed enemy. This executive order allowed for the incarceration of all peoples of Japanese descent. More than 120,000 people were placed into concentration camps. At that time, they were called assembly centers, relocation camps, and as an attempt by the government to downplay what they actually were, that they were denying citizens' rights. Now, the Japanese American population refers to these places as concentration camps. They have one thing in common when you think of concentration camps. They are people in power removing a minority group from the general population, and the rest of society allowing it to happen. Mainly, it was a case of removal of a population based on ethnicity, with the war as a rationale. However, whole populations of Germans and Italians didn't experience such a forced removal. In the case of the Japanese, religion played a large part of this thinking, as the government focused on religious practice having an influence on people's loyalty or lack of loyalty to the United States. Duncan Ryuken Williams, one of the main organizers of that Idecho book, focused on this lens of the incarceration, and he wrote a book called American Sutra, A Story of Faith and Freedom in the Second World War. The Japanese Americans struggled to retain their religious freedom, even though they were behind barbed wire fences with guard towers around the perimeter, and whole families were stripped of their privacy, often sharing one room in a hastily built wooden barrack. But the survival of the three treasures of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha in the concentration camps is significant to our Nembutsu history, despite the attempt to eradicate, suppress, or change the teaching. Following Pearl Harbor and the declaration of the war, the government targeted the religious leaders as the first to be rounded up, as our Reverend Hosen Seki was. Some of the ministers were taken without the chance of even changing their clothes or saying goodbye to their families. There was indeed premeditated planning to this roundup of the priests and ministers. There was more pressure to bring the Buddhist clergy in. There were also Christian clergy among the Japanese American population. But the main goal by the government was for assimilation to American practice. Initially, Buddhist clergy were placed together in terrible conditions without any of their sutra books, their altar implements. They often referred back to Shakyamuni's teachings as a means of survival. Actually, that was the phrase that I'm going to refer to was in today's sutra reading. Maybe you'll find it. So Shakyamuni's teaching of survival was, as Duncan Williams writes, to shape Buddhism to America, even in the most inhospitable of situations. Buddhists drew on another key teaching of the Buddha: skillful adaptation, hoben, also translated as skillful means or expedient means. In classic texts, analogy is proffered that the Buddhist teachings were akin to medicine, Just as a physician would discern the proper dispensation of medicines appropriate to the condition of the patient, the Buddha, as the great physician, skillfully adapted his teaching to the context of those hearing and receiving the Dharma. So that's end quote. An interesting story of the minister's dilemma of not having a statue of the baby Buddha for their Hanamatsuri service resulted in one of the ministers finding a large carrot in the kitchen. He carved the baby Buddha from that carrot. In fact, you'll find collections of altars, of implements made from scraps of wood gathered on the grounds of the internment camps. One of these altars survives at the Buddhist Temple of Chicago. It's a testament to the skillful means and devotion of the internees. As the Buddhist teachers began to organize Sangha groups within the internment camps, there was increasing pressure to Americanize Buddhism. This was aided by white Buddhist teachers. One of them was Reverend Julius Goldwater. He often visited the camps, and he oversaw, while the internees were in camp, 3 of the temples that are in the Los Angeles area, and he kept them safe from damage and vandalism. The pressure was to really gain more acceptance and less suspicion by external skeptics and critics. Thus, the Americanization of Buddhism took on aspects of Anglo-Protestant influences. First was to increase the use of English in the Dharma school curriculum. Sunday sermons were adapted as well as the terminology of minister, reverend, to refer to the priests. The use of church instead of temple. This was all to make it more acceptable to the outside population. Buddhist Gathas, or hymns, sung in chorus, were accompanied by organ and piano. This was another adaptation, as were service books used on Sundays. Although the books of sutras all had always been utilized. And as you well know, most of these adaptations remain within the Buddhist Churches of America, within New York Buddhist Church. It's become part of our practice, our history, and we're accustomed to it. But we should acknowledge the background for these practices. They've remained to today as part of the struggle to keep the teaching going. It was when it was questioned by the government authorities. There was a committee in the California State Legislature that actually passed a resolution calling for the cancellation of citizens, of members of the Buddhist Church. Of course, we all know that this failed. But just to think about the pressure that the ministers felt at that time to keep the teaching going, no matter what. The observance of ancestors and family members who passed away, either in the internment camps or Japanese American soldiers who served on the battlefield, was part of the intensity of the Obon service and dance. And as you know, one of our main observances during the year is the Obon service and the Obon dance, where Japanese or otherwise, Buddhist, Christian, anybody of any faith, they come to the Obon dance because it has that pull and significance for us. It's a reminder of the struggle that people went through in the past. Jodo Shinshu churches and temples as you well know, maintain this tradition, and it's core to our cultural tradition. But we should remember the importance that it held to those who were behind barbed wire fences. On the positive side, we should also recognize the three treasures of the Buddha, the teaching of the Dharma, and the Sangha assemblage. These were unifying factors to create a community that would spiritually support, comfort, unify the internees in their struggle of coping with the indignity of having been denied their freedom, their property, and their sense of self-worth. This is all part of our Nembutsu history. This is a story of one of the U.S. intelligence officers. They called them the MIS, the Military Intelligence Service. They were trained and encouraged to participate in learning Japanese. So it wasn't just Japanese or Japanese Americans, but I happen to know somebody who was Jewish who went to the MIS camp. So anyway, these were trained to actually be translators in the Pacific. So, and they were in danger too. If you were Japanese descent, you could be mistaken as part of the enemy. But this is a story of Richard Sakakida. He was one of these U.S. intelligence officers in the Philippines. He was captured by the Japanese military, and the military unit, police unit called the Kempeitai, were known for their torture tactics. They were set up to break the prisoners. He endured this torture, and he never broke. And after the war was over and he was able to be freed, he later encountered the very same people who had tortured him. He recalled the Buddhist language teachers that he had as a youth, who never responded to violence with violence. He said, "They taught us a great deal about emotional and physical control and endurance, which we call gaman, enduring something which is even unendurable." So he said, when he faced those former captor torturers, he realized he no longer wanted to return to bitter hatred and killing. And we're reminded of the Buddha's words about anger. We should not respond to anger with anger. We should respond to anger with loving kindness. So Richard Sakakida, as his tears fell, he offered those former Kempeitai officers cigarettes and candy. He attributed his forgiveness, calm, and compassion to his Buddhist faith. The New York Buddhist Church has inherited much of this history, and as we remember with deep gratitude what we've inherited from the teachers, the elders, our fellow Sangha members, we can truly understand the gift of Namo Amida Butsu by what we've learned because of their simple humility, their kindness, patience, perseverance, generosity, and wisdom, their egoless interaction with us. They are people, indeed, who are living the Nembutsu in their daily lives. When I think about them, all I can say is place my hands together in gratitude. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Cheryl, for that really moving and powerful Dharma message that we just heard. And there's nothing more to say to that except that we are the direct beneficiaries of all those sacrifices. And in the similar circumstances, it would not have been unreasonable for the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated to reject everybody and just stay together. But they did, but it wasn't necessary. They opened up Thank you. So that is our Nembutsu history, and they are our Dharma ancestors as well. They might literally be our physical Dharma ancestors, but for those of us who have come to the temple in the meantime, since 1937, they are our Dharma ancestors, and we received the teaching because of them, and we should always keep that in our hearts. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. So thank you, Reverend Cheryl. And now please rise for the Gathas. Today on Onkokusan 2 on page 134 in the Red Book, and Nembutsu on page 135. And now we come to that part of the service where we like to welcome or acknowledge new visitors to the New York Buddhist Church. So if this is your first time, I invite you to stand up, not command, I invite you to stand up and state your name and how you came to see us today. Well, welcome. Thank you very much. Yes, yes. Well, welcome. We're glad you did, and come back. Okay, so now is the time for acknowledgements of those who made this service possible today, and especially to Reverend Cheryl Joko Ikemiya, who gave us a very heartfelt and deep Dharma talk, which I'm sure will resonate all week with us. Thank you very much for that. I would like to thank my fellow minister assistant Nobuko Kodama for helping with the chanting, with Kaz Kasugawa for doing the beautiful Kansho bell, gathering us together today, to our piano player, who is John Skelly, who was the Horowitz of the Gathas, and to our tech team, Carl and David, who keep us on the air and turn off the reverb whenever it happens. And the flowers, of course, are Junko Yamakawa. I always screw this up. And there is a flyer in the back. She has a great class, and it's a very, very, as you can see, they are very beautiful, and she'll teach you to do that at home. And so pick up the flyer on the way out. She's actually here. You can meet her. And thank you for that. They're very, very beautiful. And the last thing is to thank all of you for coming to these things, because if you didn't, what would be the point? You know? So thank you for coming. We all make the service together, not just the people up on the Nijin. We chant together. It's very important to remember that. And so thank you once again. And now I invite anyone to give any announcements. Anything? Anything? Oh, yeah. Next month, we will have some special speakers. For the Shotsuki Hoyo, Reverend Todd Tsuchiya from Midwest Buddhist Temple will be virtually online here, giving a Dharma talk. He's always great to hear. And then for Higan-e, which is the spring equinox, Reverend Ron Miyamura will be here. And that's always a great joy to us. So looking forward to that. Is there anything else? April, we have Hanamatsuri also. That's April 9th, I think, or something like that. It's one of the early Sundays. And so that concludes our service for today. Please join me in final Gassho. With gratitude for being able to have a Nembutsu history, we say the Buddha's most honored name, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. So thank you very much, and please come again and tell all your friends.